Caleb's exes always knew how to fit in, Marjorie Whitmore said, smiling like she had not just cut her daughter-in-law in front of an entire table. For 1 second, no one moved. Then someone gave a soft little laugh, the kind people use when they know something is cruel but do not want to be the first one brave enough to call it that. Talia Brooks sat beside her husband in the fellowship hall of First Grace Church, her hands folded neatly over a white cloth napkin, her wedding ring catching the warm light from the chandeliers above. She had spent all afternoon helping set up that fundraiser. She had arranged the donation cards, checked the dessert table, fixed the microphone when it would not work, and made sure every elderly guest had a seat close enough to hear the speeches. But now, in front of half of Fairmont Springs, she was being measured against women who were not even in the room. Marjorie lifted her glass a little higher, enjoying the attention. Claire had such polish, she went on. Madison knew every family in town by name. And Lauren, bless her heart, she could walk into any room and make people feel like they were at the governor's mansion. A few people chuckled again. Talia felt the heat rise slowly up her neck, but she kept her face calm. She had learned that in the Whitmore family, do not flinch, do not answer too fast, do not give them the satisfaction of seeing the wound. Caleb sat close enough for his sleeve to touch hers. He heard every word. Everyone knew he heard every word. Talia waited for him to say something simple. Mom, that is enough. Or, Talia belongs here. Or even just her name, spoken with respect. Instead, Caleb leaned toward her without looking away from his plate and murmured, "Please do not make this a thing." That was when something inside Talia went very still. Not broken, not loud, just still. Across the table, Mrs. Donnelly from the bakery looked down at her coffee cup. Pastor Glenn cleared his throat, but said nothing. Caleb's campaign treasurer pretended to check his phone. And Marjorie, pleased with the quiet she had created, patted Talia's hand like she was comforting a child. "You are sweet, dear," she said. "You just have a lot to learn about how things are done here." Talia looked at that hand on top of hers. Pale pink nails, gold bracelet, perfect manners wrapped around a rotten little insult. She gently slid her hand away. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Talia," he whispered, warning in his voice, as if she were the problem. She turned to him then, really turned, and saw the man she had defended for 3 years. The man whose speeches she edited after midnight. The man whose mother's birthday card she mailed when he forgot. The man who let people call him honorable because she had spent their whole marriage cleaning up the places where his character fell short. Her fingers trembled under the table, but her voice did not. "I am not making anything," she said softly. "I am just listening." Marjorie smiled again, thinking she had won. Caleb exhaled like a man relieved the scene had passed. Around them, forks touched plates, conversations restarted, and the fundraiser rolled on as if dignity had not just been spilled across the table like cheap coffee. But at the far end of the room, a teenage volunteer lowered her phone slowly, her eyes wide. She had been recording the toast for the church page. And without meaning to, she had captured every word. That night, the drive home from First Grace Church felt longer than the 8 miles it actually was. Fairmont Springs was quiet after 9 o'clock. All porch lights, closed storefronts, and the soft yellow glow from the gas station on Route 12. Caleb kept both hands on the wheel of his silver pickup, staring straight ahead like silence could smooth over what his mother had done. Talia sat beside him with her purse in her lap, her thumb rubbing the edge of the program from the fundraiser until the paper bent. "You embarrassed me tonight," Caleb finally said. Talia turned her head slowly. "I embarrassed you," he sighed, the way he always did when he wanted to sound patient. "You pulled your hand away from my mother in front of everyone." A small laugh almost came out of Talia, but it died in her throat. "She compared me to your ex-girlfriends at a church table, Caleb." She was joking. "No, she was testing me. And you helped her." His face tightened, but he did not answer. That was the thing about Caleb Whitmore. He rarely had to raise his voice to make Talia feel alone. He just withdrew, turned cold, and waited for her to apologize for noticing the hurt. 3 years earlier, when Talia first moved to Fairmont Springs, she had believed love could make a place feel like home. She came from Raleigh with 2 suitcases, a teaching certificate, and a heart full of plans. Caleb had been charming back then. He opened doors, remembered her coffee order, and told her that small towns were not perfect, but people came around once they saw who you were. Talia believed him. She wanted to believe him. At their wedding, Marjorie wore cream and called it champagne. She smiled in every picture, but never once called Talia family. After the honeymoon, the little comments began. At Sunday lunch, Marjorie said Claire used to bring homemade biscuits, not store-bought rolls. At the Christmas bazaar, she mentioned Madison had always known which donors mattered. At a 4th of July cookout, she told a neighbor that Talia was still adjusting, as if Talia were a stray dog learning not to scratch the furniture. Caleb always said the same thing afterward. That is just Mom. And Talia, trying to be a good wife, swallowed it. She swallowed the way women looked at her hair before complimenting her dress. She swallowed the way older men called Caleb brave for marrying outside expectations. She swallowed the way Marjorie corrected her recipes, her table settings, her tone, her church hat, even the way she laughed. Little by little, Talia learned to make herself easier to accept. She dressed softer, spoke slower, worked harder. She volunteered at bake sales, tutoring nights, coat drives, and town cleanups. She edited Caleb's campaign emails after grading spelling tests until midnight. She helped him sound compassionate in speeches he barely understood. She made him look steady, thoughtful, decent. And still, inside the Whitmore house, there was always another woman from his past being held up like a mirror Talia was supposed to hate herself in. When they pulled into the driveway, Caleb cut the engine and sat there. "My mother wants what is best for me," he said. Talia looked at the white columns on the porch, the hanging ferns she watered every morning, the brass mailbox she polished before Marjorie's garden club visits. "And what do you want from me?" she asked. Caleb did not look at her. He only opened his door and stepped out into the dark. Talia stayed in the truck for a moment, staring at the empty driver's seat. That was when she understood something she had been avoiding for years. Marjorie's cruelty hurt, but Caleb's silence had given it permission. Inside the house, everything looked the way Talia had left it that morning, and somehow that made it worse. The living room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and the vanilla candle Marjorie always said was too strong. Caleb dropped his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and went straight to his office without another word. Talia stood in the entryway, still wearing her church shoes, still holding the bent fundraiser program in her hand. For a minute, she thought about following him. She thought about asking him to sit down, to talk like two married people who still had something worth saving. But she already knew how it would go. Caleb would rub his forehead, call her sensitive, and say he had a busy week ahead. So Talia went upstairs, changed out of her dress, washed her face, and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror under the bright white bulbs. Her eyes were tired, but they were clear. The next morning, she did what she had always done. She got up before Caleb, made coffee, packed his lunch, and left a folder on the kitchen island with the revised talking points for his town council announcement. She had stayed up until 2 o'clock fixing the speech because the first draft sounded stiff and empty. Caleb came downstairs in a navy suit, scanned the folder, and nodded like the work had appeared by magic. "This is better," he said. "Not thank you. Not I know you are exhausted. Just better." Talia watched him tuck the pages into his briefcase. "Caleb," she said softly, "we cannot keep pretending nothing is wrong." He paused near the door. "I do not have time for this before work." "You never have time when it is me." His face hardened. "That is not fair." She wanted to ask him what part was unfair, the words or the truth, but the door opened before she could speak. Marjorie walked in without knocking, carrying a garment bag and the smell of expensive perfume. "Good. You are both here," she said. "Caleb, I brought the suit for Thursday. The gray one makes you look more approachable." Then her eyes moved to Talia. "And dear, maybe wear something simple that night. Nothing too bold. We want voters focused on Caleb." Talia felt her fingers tighten around her coffee mug. Caleb looked at his watch. "Mom, not now." For half a second, hope lifted in Talia's chest. Then he added, "We are already running late." "Not now. Not stop. Not apologize. Just not now." That afternoon at school, Talia helped a little boy named Marcus sound out the word courage. He frowned at the page, struggling, then looked up at her. "Does it mean being scared but doing it anyway?" Talia smiled, but the answer landed somewhere deep. "Yes," she said. "That is exactly what it means." By the end of the week, she had stopped arguing and started paying attention. Late at night, after Caleb fell asleep, Talia opened her laptop at the kitchen table. She made a folder with no dramatic name, just records. Into it, she saved campaign emails she had written, donor lists she had organized, receipts from events paid partly from their joint account, and messages where Caleb asked her to make him sound human. She was not planning revenge. Not then. She was trying to remind herself that she had not imagined her own life. On Thursday evening, while Caleb and Marjorie rehearsed his announcement in the dining room, Talia stood in the hallway holding a basket of folded towels. Marjorie's voice carried clearly through the old house. "You married her to prove a point," she said. "But you do not have to spend your whole life defending a mistake." Talia stopped breathing for a moment. The towel on top slipped from the basket and landed silently at her feet. She waited for Caleb to say something. Anything. The house seemed to hold its breath with her. Finally, Caleb answered, low and tired. "I know, Mom." That was all. 2 words. Small enough to pass through a closed door, heavy enough to end a marriage. Talia bent down, picked up the towel, and walked upstairs without making a sound. The next morning, Caleb came into the kitchen with a manila envelope in his hand and a calmness on his face that told her his mother had not just planted the idea. She had helped him prepare it. The envelope looked too ordinary for something meant to end a woman's life inside her own home. Caleb placed it on the kitchen island between the coffee pot and the folder of campaign notes Talia had finished for him the night before. For a second, she stared at the brown paper instead of his face, because looking at him felt like touching a hot stove. Marjorie stood near the window in a cream blouse and pearls, calm as Sunday morning, her purse tucked under one arm like she had only stopped by to discuss flower arrangements. Caleb cleared his throat. "Talia, I think we both know this has not been working." The refrigerator hummed behind him. Somewhere outside, a lawn mower started up across the street. Normal life carrying on like nothing inside this kitchen was breaking. Talia looked at the envelope. "We both know?" she asked. Caleb shifted his weight. "I do not want this to get ugly." Marjorie gave a small nod, approving the line as if he had practiced it well. "No one wants ugly," she said. "That is why it is better to handle this with grace." Talia almost smiled at that word. Grace, from the woman who had spent 3 years making sure every room felt smaller when Talia walked into it. Caleb opened the envelope and slid out the papers. Divorce petition. Temporary separation agreement. A list of household items divided so neatly it looked like they were splitting office supplies, not a marriage. "The house belongs to the Whitmore Trust," Caleb said, not quite meeting her eyes. "You know that. My attorney thinks it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay by Monday." It was Friday. Talia's hand moved to the edge of the island, steadying herself. "You want me out in 3 days. I am trying to be fair. Fair would have been talking to me before you let your mother plan my exit." Caleb flinched, but Marjorie stepped in before he could answer. She placed a white envelope beside the divorce papers. "This should help with a deposit somewhere. Nothing fancy, of course, but enough to get started." Talia looked at the envelope, then at Marjorie's soft pink nails resting against it. "You brought moving money." "I brought kindness," Marjorie said. Talia's throat tightened, but her eyes stayed dry. That was the strange part. She had imagined that if this day ever came, she would fall apart. Instead, she felt awake. Every sound was sharp. The spoon in Caleb's coffee cup, the click of Marjorie's bracelet, the faint buzz of Caleb's phone on the counter, lighting up with a message from his campaign manager asking if the family issue was handled. Family issue. That was what she had become. Caleb saw her read it and turned the phone over quickly. "Talia," he said, softer now, as if softness could cover cowardice. "You will always matter to me." She looked at him then, really looked. "Do not do that." His brow creased. "Do what?" "Do not throw me out of your life and ask me to feel honored by the way you worded it." The kitchen went still. Marjorie's smile slipped for the first time. Talia reached down and slowly removed her wedding ring. It resisted for a second, caught at the knuckle, and the tiny sting of it almost broke her. Almost. Then it slid free. She placed it on top of the white envelope, right over Marjorie's money. Caleb stared at the ring like he had not understood until that moment that she could leave without begging. "Keep it," Talia said. "I do not need a souvenir from a place where I had to ask to be defended." She walked upstairs with her back straight and packed one suitcase, not because that was all she owned, but because that was all she needed that morning. In the side pocket, she slipped a flash drive holding every email, every receipt, every speech draft, every quiet proof of the woman Caleb thought he could erase. When she came back down, Marjorie was waiting by the door. "I hope you find peace, dear," she said. Talia paused with her hand on the suitcase handle. I did, she said. The moment I stopped waiting for your son to give it to me. Then she stepped out onto the porch, past the ferns she had watered, past the mailbox she had polished, past the life they thought belonged only to them. Caleb watched from the doorway, believing she was leaving with nothing. He did not know the truth had already left with her. For the first 2 nights, Talia slept in a room above Bellamy's bakery with one suitcase beside the bed and the sound of delivery trucks rattling the alley before sunrise. The apartment was small, just a narrow bedroom, a bathroom with old blue tile, and a kitchen window that looked down over Main Street. The floorboards creaked. The radiator clicked. The ceiling fan wobbled like it had secrets. But when Talia locked the door behind her, nobody walked in without knocking. Nobody corrected how she folded towels or held a fork or stood beside her husband in public. That alone felt like air. On Monday morning, she put on a clean blouse, tied her hair back, and reported to Fairmont Springs Elementary as a substitute teacher. The principal, Mrs. Alvarez, looked surprised to see her name on the schedule. Talia, I heard you were taking some time. Talia gave a small smile. I decided time was not going to pay rent. Mrs. Alvarez studied her face, gentle but careful. In a town that small, news traveled faster than weather. 3rd grade needs you today, she said. They have been wild since spring break. Talia walked into room 14 with a stack of worksheets and a heart that still felt bruised around the edges. But then Marcus looked up from his desk and grinned. Mrs. Brooks, you came back. Something in her chest loosened. I told you I would, she said. By the end of the week, parents were stopping her at pickup. One mother asked if she still helped with reading after school. Another asked if she knew anyone who could look over a job application. A boy from 5th grade brought his little sister to Talia and whispered, she gets stuck on big words. Talia started staying late in the library, first with 3 kids, then 6, then 12. She brought snacks from the bakery downstairs, day-old muffins wrapped in napkins, and made the children sound out words with their fingers under each line. She did not call it a program. She did not post about it. She just turned on the lamps, opened the books, and made room. Across town, Caleb began telling a different story. At the hardware store, he told Mr. Pike the separation was painful but mutual. At church, Marjorie said Talia had always struggled to settle in. At a campaign breakfast, Caleb spoke about family values with tired eyes and a careful voice, and people nodded because Whitmore's had been nodded at for generations. Talia heard pieces of it everywhere. In the grocery aisle, outside the post office, from women who hugged her too tightly and men who suddenly called her ma'am like pity had made them polite. Every time, she smiled, paid for her groceries, and went back to work. But silence was not the same as surrender. At night, she sat at the little kitchen table above the bakery, opened her laptop, and added more files to the folder marked records. Not angry captions, not gossip, just dates, emails, receipts, drafts, proof. Her hands did not shake anymore when she clicked save. One rainy Thursday, almost 3 weeks after she left the Whitmore house, a young mother named Keisha Bennett came to the library after the last child had gone. She held her phone in both hands like it was heavier than it looked. Mrs. Brooks, she said quietly, my niece volunteered at the church fundraiser. Talia looked up from stacking picture books. Keisha swallowed. She was recording the toast for the church page. She caught what Mrs. Whitmore said. And Caleb too. The room seemed to go quiet around the rain, tapping the windows. Talia looked at the phone, then at the empty chairs where children had been reading only minutes before. She did not reach for it right away. Why bring this to me, she asked. Keisha's eyes softened. Because they are out here telling people you walked away from a good man. And I think maybe the town should hear what a good man let happen. Talia stood very still. For weeks, she had been trying to build a life without burning anything down. But now the truth was standing in front of her, glowing on a phone screen, waiting to be seen. Talia did not watch the video in the library. She waited until she got back to the apartment above Bellamy's bakery, locked the door, and sat at the little kitchen table with the rain still ticking against the window. Keisha had sent it to her with one message. You do not have to do anything with this. I just thought you deserved to know it exists. For almost 10 minutes, Talia stared at the screen without pressing play. She already knew what was on it. She had lived it. She had felt the heat in her face, the weight of Caleb's silence, the small, cruel smile on Marjorie's mouth. But knowing a wound existed was different from watching it happen from the outside. Finally, She tapped the video. The church fellowship hall appeared, bright and busy, with paper flowers on the tables and people laughing over sweet tea. Then Marjorie's voice cut through the room, smooth as butter on a warm biscuit. Claire had such polish. Madison knew every family in town by name. Talia watched herself sitting there, still and polite, while the woman beside her husband peeled her dignity away one sentence at a time. Then came Caleb's voice, low but clear enough for the phone to catch. Please do not make this a thing. Talia paused the video. The apartment went silent except for the radiator clicking near the wall. She had expected to feel anger, but what came first was grief. Not the loud kind. The tired kind. The kind that sits down beside you and says, now you see it too. The next morning, Keisha found her outside the school, helping Marcus zip his backpack. Are you going to post it? She asked quietly. Talia shook her head. I do not want my pain turned into town entertainment. Keisha nodded, but her face held something stubborn. Then what happens when Caleb keeps lying? Talia had no answer. By Friday, Caleb gave her one. He stood on the stage at the Fairmont Springs Town Hall, under a blue banner that read Strong Families, Strong Future. Marjorie sat in the front row wearing pearls and a proud smile, while half the town filled the folding chairs. Talia had not planned to attend, but Mrs. Alvarez asked her to come because the school funding proposal was on the agenda. So she sat near the back, quiet, with a notebook in her lap. Caleb stepped to the microphone and spoke in that warm, practiced voice she had helped him build. This town raised me, he said. It taught me faith, responsibility, and respect. Those values matter to me, especially now, during a difficult private season. But I have always believed a man's character is shown by how he treats family. Talia looked down at her hands. Her wedding ring was gone, but the pale Market had left was still there. The room applauded. Caleb placed one hand over his heart. Marjorie dabbed at the corner of her eye like she had written the moment herself. And something in Talia settled. Not snapped. Settled. After the meeting, she walked outside into the warm evening air, opened her laptop in the passenger seat of her car, and sent one email to Nora Finch, the editor of the Fairmont Springs Ledger. She did not send gossip. She sent records. Campaign drafts in her name. Receipts from their joint account. Messages where Caleb asked her to rewrite his speeches about compassion. And at the very bottom, she attached the video. 3 days later, the article went live before sunrise. By breakfast, every phone in Fairmont Springs seemed to glow with the same headline. By lunch, people were not whispering about why Talia left anymore. They were asking what kind of man lets his wife be humiliated, then builds a campaign on respect. Caleb called her 17 times. She did not answer once. At 4 o'clock, her phone rang again from an unknown number. Talia picked up. A calm woman's voice said, Mrs. Brooks, this is Andrea Coleman. I am an attorney with Coleman and Reeves. I believe it is time we talk about protecting your name. Talia looked out the bakery window at Main Street, where people were already stopping in small groups, reading, sharing, waking up. Caleb had spent years counting on her silence. He had never imagined her silence was gathering receipts. By the next Tuesday, Fairmont Springs no longer felt like the same town. People still lined up for coffee at Bellamy's. The same men still argued about college football outside Pike Hardware. The same church bell still rang at noon. But now, when Talia walked down Main Street, conversations did not stop because people were judging her. They stopped because people were ashamed of what they had believed. Mrs. Donnelly from the bakery caught her near the crosswalk and touched her arm gently. Talia, she said, her voice lower than usual. I should have said something that night. Talia looked at the woman's tired eyes and saw a real regret there. A lot of people should have, she said. Not cruelly, just honestly. Mrs. Donnelly nodded like she deserved that. The town council held an emergency public meeting 2 nights later after Nora Finch's article spread through every neighborhood, church group, and school parent chat in town. Caleb's campaign team called it a misunderstanding. Marjorie called it a private family matter. But the people of Fairmont Springs had watched the video. They had heard the words. They had heard Caleb ask his wife to stay quiet instead of asking his mother to stop. That was not a misunderstanding. That was a choice. Talia came to the meeting with Andrea Coleman, her attorney, but she did not sit in the front row. She chose a seat near the back, wearing a simple cream sweater and dark jeans, her hair pulled away from her face. She looked calm, but her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. Andrea leaned over and whispered, You do not have to speak tonight unless you want to. Talia nodded. I know. At the front of the room, Caleb stood near the microphone, looking polished but pale. Marjorie sat beside him in a navy dress, her posture straight, her mouth tight. For the first time since Talia had known her, Marjorie looked less like a queen holding court and more like a woman waiting for the room to turn on her. Caleb began with a practiced apology. I understand that some comments made during a private moment have caused hurt, he said. A murmur moved through the room. From the second row, Keisha Bennett stood up with her arms folded. That was not a private moment. It was a church fundraiser. My niece was there serving lemonade. A few people clapped. Caleb swallowed. I only meant that families sometimes have complicated dynamics. Then Mrs. Alvarez stood from the school section. Complicated is when people disagree about Thanksgiving plans, Caleb. What we saw was your wife being humiliated while you protected your image. The room went quiet. One by one, people stood. Mr. Pike from the hardware store admitted Talia had written the grant letter that helped fund the downtown cleanup Caleb had bragged about. A single mother named Ruth said Talia stayed after school twice a week to help her daughter read, without asking for a dime. Pastor Glenn stood last, looking older than he had a week ago. I failed to speak when kindness required it, he said. Mrs. Brooks showed more grace in silence than many of us showed with our words. Talia felt something rise in her chest, but it was not pride. It was relief, so deep it almost hurt. For years, she had wondered if anyone saw her. Now the whole room was saying they had. Caleb turned toward her, eyes pleading across the rows of folding chairs. But this time, Talia did not move toward him. She did not soften to rescue him from the consequences of his own silence. She only sat straighter as the room, one voice at a time, chose the truth. Caleb stood at the microphone as if the floor beneath him had shifted, but he was too proud to reach for the wall. For most of his life, Fairmont Springs had given him the benefit of the doubt before he even asked for it. Teachers smiled at him because he was a Whitmore. Bankers returned his calls because he was a Whitmore. Church ladies saved him the best slice of pie because he was a Whitmore. But that night, under the buzzing lights of the town hall, his last name did not protect him. It only made the silence louder. He adjusted his tie and looked over the room with a careful, wounded expression. I want to apologize to anyone who felt hurt by what they saw, he began. Talia watched Andrea's pen stop moving beside her. Felt hurt. Not who I hurt. Not what I allowed. Caleb kept going. My family has always tried to serve this community with dignity, and in emotional moments, words can be misunderstood. A low sound moved through the chairs, not quite a laugh, not quite anger, but something tired and disappointed. Marjorie rose before anyone called on her. This is getting out of hand, she said, her voice sharp beneath the polish. Every family has private disagreements. Talia was welcomed into our home. We gave her every opportunity to belong. Talia felt I turned toward the back row. For the first time, she did not shrink from it. Andrea leaned close. Only speak if you are ready. Talia stood. The room settled so quickly that even the air conditioner seemed to quiet down. She walked to the side microphone, not fast, not dramatic, just steady. Caleb's face changed as she came closer. There was panic in it now, hidden under the smile he used for donors. Talia, he said softly, as if her name still belonged to him. She did not look at him first. She looked at the people who had watched her serve food, tutor children, write grant letters, and carry herself through humiliation with her chin up. Then she looked at Caleb. You keep calling it a misunderstanding, she said. But there was nothing unclear about that night. Marjorie opened her mouth, but Pastor Glenn raised one hand. Let her speak. Talia took one breath. Your mother did not accidentally compare me to every woman you dated before me. And you did not accidentally stay quiet. You chose not to protect me because protecting me would have cost you comfort. Caleb swallowed. That is not fair. No, Talia said gently. What was not fair was asking me to build your public image while you let your family tear down my private one. Andrea stepped forward then, placing a slim folder on the council table. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. For the record, we have documentation showing that Mrs. Brooks drafted substantial portions of Mr. Whitmore's community platform, coordinated donor outreach, and helped secure volunteer commitments later presented as his independent campaign work. We also have financial records from the marital account that will be addressed through proper legal channels. The room turned toward Caleb again. and this time he had no speech ready. His campaign manager, sitting near the aisle, closed his laptop slowly. One of the council members removed the Whitmore campaign button from her jacket and placed it in her purse. Marjorie sat down as if her knees had finally remembered her age. Caleb looked at Talia, and for one heartbreaking second, she saw the man she once loved under all that pride. "I never meant to lose you," he said. Talia nodded, because she believed that part. He had not meant to lose her. He had meant to keep her small, useful, quiet, and grateful. That was worse. "You did not lose me, Caleb," she said. "You let me walk through fire alone, then acted surprised when I came out without needing your hand." Nobody clapped at first. The room was too full for that, too heavy with the truth landing where excuses used to sit. Then Keisha stood. Mrs. Alvarez stood next. Mr. Pike, Ruth, Pastor Glenn, and row by row, the town rose with them. Not for a performance, not for revenge, for the woman they had finally learned how to see. Caleb stepped back from the microphone, pale and silent. And for the first time in his life, he lost the room to someone he had once treated like she did not belong in it. 3 months later, the old brick library on Maple Street opened its doors again for the first time in 7 years. Someone had scrubbed the windows until sunlight poured through them like warm honey. The broken sign had been replaced. The weeds along the sidewalk were gone. Inside, folding chairs filled every open space, and children sat cross-legged on the rug near the front, whispering over new picture books that still smelled like paper and glue. Above the main desk hung a simple wooden sign carved by Mr. Pike himself, the Brooks Learning House. Talia had argued against the name when the committee first suggested it. "There are plenty of people who helped," she told Mrs. Alvarez. But Mrs. Alvarez only smiled and said, "That is exactly why it should be yours. You taught us what helping looks like." Talia stood near the doorway in the same blue dress she had worn to the church fundraiser, not because she had planned some grand symbol, but because that morning, when she saw it hanging in her closet, it no longer felt like a reminder of humiliation. It felt like proof that a woman could survive a room that tried to shrink her and walk back into the world standing taller. Keisha adjusted the ribbon by the door and looked her over. "You ready?" Talia let out a quiet breath. "No," Keisha laughed softly. "Good. Ready people are usually boring." The mayor gave a short speech. Pastor Glenn offered a humble prayer, this time without hiding from the truth. Children read thank you cards out loud. Marcus, now reading whole pages without stopping, stood on a chair and said, "Mrs. Brooks helped me learn the word courage. It means you are scared but you do it anyway." The room went still for a second, then filled with applause. Talia pressed a hand to her chest, and for once, she did not swallow the feeling down. She let herself receive it. Across the street, Caleb stood near his parked truck, watching through the library windows. He looked thinner, quieter, no longer polished by applause. His campaign had ended before Election Day. The town had not shouted him out of public life. It had simply stopped pretending not to see him clearly. Marjorie sat in the passenger seat, her pearls still perfect, her face turned away from the building. Caleb held his phone for a long time before sending one message. "Can we talk?" Inside, Talia felt her phone buzz in her purse. She checked the screen. For a moment, the old version of her rose up out of habit. The woman trained to answer quickly, soften the silence, make everybody comfortable. Then she looked around, at the children waiting for the first story, at the parents who had shown up after work, at the women who had once looked away and now stood beside her. She turned the phone face down. Keisha noticed and raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" Talia smiled, small but real. "It is now." Then she walked to the front of the room and opened a book. Her voice was steady as she began to read, and the children leaned in like the world had gone quiet just for them. Outside, Caleb watched her through the glass, finally understanding what he had never understood when she was his wife. Respect is not something a family name can hand you. It is not something you can borrow from a church pew, a campaign sign, or a mother who mistakes control for love. Respect is built in small, unseen moments, in the way you treat people when no crowd is watching, in the courage to tell the truth when silence would be easier, in the grace to walk away from places that only loved you when you stayed small. Talia Brooks did not win because she destroyed anyone. She won because she stopped asking the wrong people for permission to be valued. And sometimes, that is the deepest revenge a woman can have. Not to become cruel, not to become cold, but to become so whole that the people who once dismissed her can no longer reach the life she built without them.